Welcome to the OpsTok podcast. In this podcast, we explore the intersection of operations, technology, and business excellence with highly accomplished owners and operators.
Today's special guest, Mohammed Salama, Lean Management Systems.
Welcome to OpsTok, the podcast where we explore the intersection of operations, technology, and business excellence in diverse industries and settings. Here on OpsTok, we interview highly accomplished operators and owners. I'm Sahand, and let me introduce my co-host, Tom.
Thanks, Sahand. Hi, Tom here. Today we have a special guest, Mohammed Salama, who's an expert in operations with strong experience in business operations with manufacturing background in the automotive field and now taking his knowledge to other industries. Please welcome Mohammed Salama. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you guys both. Just to give a brief introduction and a bit of my skills and experience and background, I've worked in the manufacturing industry for about 20 years now. Started off with Ford Motor Company as a manufacturing advisor for about 5 years. Learned the Greenbelt system there and the Ford production system as well. Managed 40 to 50 unionized employees while we built the Crown Victoria Grand Marquis, or also known as the Police Interceptor cop car. 5 years later, I transitioned over to General Motors. At the time, it was called Cami Automotive. It was a joint venture between Suzuki and General Motors at the time. Came in as a group leader there, worked my way through department business leader, project leader, and then into the General Motors Systems lead role, and then into planning and strategy. Learned a lot about Kaizen, continuous improvement. I was black belt certified and OpEx trained during my time there. Worked on a lot of continuous improvement projects, facilitated a lot of training on the General Motors system to the entire facility, and got a good chance to meet a lot of people and do benchmark visits at our site. Because in terms of General Motors as a whole, we were leading the company in terms of process systems and implementation. So that's pretty much my 20 years in a nutshell.
Amazing. That's such an incredible career. And I remember when I was like first studying industrial engineering, automotive companies are always like the benchmark for just the best continuous improvement. And yeah, would love to dig in a little bit more about, what makes automotive such a unique place that requires such process improvement. I think a lot of our listeners
Yeah.
probably never have no idea what automotive manufacturing looks like.
Yeah. So automotive manufacturing, typically most sites, plants, you're building a vehicle every minute and a half, 2 minutes at the longest. So in terms of urgency at the sites, you're based basically every minute. So you look at your contribution margin or your sale, and they say if we're down for a minute, then that unit's lost. We can never make it back. So there's a lot of intensity in terms of being able to build the product on time. So you've got your build to plan and your ship to plan, and meeting those objectives. And on all of your budgets are based on, you building that amount of vehicles every single day, every single month, meeting those objectives. So, always staying on top of things, making sure things are standardized, processes are good, quality is good. It's not just about running the lines of those vehicles that come off the end of the line. They've got a process to go through in order for them to get shipped, and it has to happen in a timely manner. You can create so many bottlenecks in terms of, backing up your repair area, having lots of repairs go off the end of the line. And, as soon as you, take a vehicle off the end of the line and need to tear it apart for a certain repair, when it goes back, it's not as good as it was when it was built the first time through. So always a lot of urgency. In terms of external, maintaining a fair market price for the vehicle. It's tough enough as it is. There's a lot of new companies that have entered the Canadian or North American markets, so we need to be able to keep the prices where they need to be. And there's always typically a 3% reduction for headcount in house in order to maintain that. So you're trying to get your product out there, you're trying to beat your customer in terms of quality and price. So very, very cutthroat business. And, you've really got to stay on top of it with standardized processes. Yeah.
And so I know this, the fact that it's a highly a high volume environment, and not a whole lot of margin for error. The more you can produce the goods, the vehicles,
Yeah.
sort of perfectly, I guess, the better. Of course, it's never reached. So you talked about a lot of standard procedures, a lot of probably training. I know for a fact that there's a lot of software used, but there's also probably systems in place that don't use software. That's always as a tech, a tech executive, a tech leader. I'm always interested in some of these processes and how you identified where you did not apply tech and it actually helps you, which is funny because I am in tech. We sell technology,
Okay.
but I'm really interested because there are processes where you do not want to apply tech
That's
because of
correct.
variability, creativity. So I'm curious to know if there's any of those you can think about or remember and recount for us.
It wouldn't be that techy. It's more in terms of conveyors. So you can have conveyors that bring a product through the door. Let's say it's mufflers, and you've got two of them on there, and you have an operator selecting from this batch, and then he goes to this batch. Well, what happens sometimes is those conveyors get jammed up. When those conveyors get jammed up, then you're looking at a downtime situation. I remember we did a continuous improvement event a while back where we actually eliminated the conveyor. We were able to look at the forklift operator that was delivering those parts onto the conveyor. We were able to, condense some of his footprint and then give him more time back in order for him to facilitate loading those mufflers directly to the line without loading them into a conveyor. So, sometimes conveyance or technology helps, and sometimes it hinders, depending if you can work it back into like an operator or a base person, right?
100%. That's great.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Like, how would you look at an operation when you do an event like that from the perspective of what kind of team members do you engage in those
Yeah.
discussions? What kind of
So
skill
when
sets do you?
when we launched the event, we gathered people. So from the forklift side, it was the material handling team. We gathered those folks in the production side, and then we also had leadership from both parties. And then we also involve people that are not there for the entire week, such as safety representatives, ergonomic representatives, and then our finance team in terms of what the costs or what the implications are going to be, and if it makes a good business case to do so. So you've got a lot of your production people are definitely impacted when you do those events. So typically we take people off the shop floor for a week, and I've seen up to 2 weeks in terms of very, very complex problems that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what would be like the tricks you would share with other leaders when they want to engage those folks in joining the problem, right? Because like at the end of the day, people like to be part of the initiative, but also there's a resistance to change that naturally is in us also.
Absolutely. So typically when we do these events, we have a kickoff meeting with the senior leadership there. We go through why we're doing the event, what we hope the outcomes to be, what the 7-step process is, and why we're doing it. So as leadership leaves, everyone gets a chance to air out their dirty laundry and really get involved and engage and say what their problems are, and then through going through the 7-step process, everything begins to come out. So if an issue is brought up, then it's an issue that's worked on, right? So essentially the team knows the end in mind is we may eliminate this piece of equipment, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to figure out how to get these parts online without having continuous downtime. So just making sure everybody understands is key. Engaging them and addressing their concerns and their issues is very, very important.
I'm gonna ask here, just in case that we have, and we probably do have audience that's not as familiar with the processes potentially. Tell us a little bit about the 7 steps that you just mentioned.
Okay, so a lot of them are based off of the DIMAIC approach. So define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. We just broke it out into 7. There's a little bit more things around standardization in the final few steps in terms of standardizing the trial, making sure that the communication is there, and then fully implementing it, not just at your site, but then we would take it to a website called Innovation Marketplace. We would share it and cascade it with the entire organization. So that way, if anyone else had an issue with that, piece of equipment, with that process, with that part, they're able to search it, and then they can see, a quick 2-pager before, what were the issues, and after, what was implemented, and what it looks like in the after. So a lot
that's
of it's
fantastic.
based, a lot of it's
So
based
like an
on
internal
planning.
knowledge system that actually collected a library of these, DIMAKE, pardon me, I
DIMAKE,
don't,
yeah,
DIMAKE use cases in which, okay, that's
yeah,
fantastic. That's beautiful.
absolutely,
And like,
absolutely.
I guess it was an initiative that is implemented at certain companies and it comes from the top. And what's the metrics? Like what are, what's a good department in
Yeah.
terms of being a contributor to such a library?
So typically where it starts is each department in the organization is responsible for completing one departmental, depending on who owned the facility, it was called one Kaizen event per quarter, or one continuous event per quarter, or one OpEx. Either way, you have one CI event per quarter, and that's on your level 1 and level 2 scorecard. So you've got your senior leadership looking for that, and then you've got your departmental leadership looking for that on theirs. So as they go through this, you can work on more per month in your department, but there's typically one major event that will make it onto that scorecard, and that typical one will be the one that goes into that innovation marketplace. You can have more, but having it as a KPI that's tracked at all levels of the organization is what I believe the key driver is, because that's essentially what we're measured against. So, when you've got the top person in the organization saying, I expect to have, a total of, let's say I've got 7 departments, and I expect to have 7 CI events on a monthly basis, right? So he looks for that, and for each one of his directors to have one of those completed.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really, it really shows kind of, what I've seen in the industry, where there's 2 camps that all manufacturing seems to fall into. There's the one where you have the passionate production systems, Kaizen way of thinking, where we're constantly improving. We need to be better. And then there's also the other manufacturing where it's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we've been doing this for 20 some years, and
Yeah.
we're gonna be doing it the same for 20 years. And it's interesting to basically, you see that in an automotive manufacturing, which is very competitive, right? A lot of manufacturing companies out there, and for
Yeah.
those that haven't had a chance to be in an automotive plant, I mean, it's a whole orchestrated effort to because I mean, a lot of these cars, right, they get measured in minutes, right? How many get produced? That's incredible tack time. So having all that and all the variations, when we think about all the cars on the lot
Oh
and
yeah.
different and on top of it, right? Tell us about, because this was pretty interesting for other industries. So automotive, there is like a new model that comes out every so many years, right? And there are big changes.
Correct.
How does that like impact the manufacturing? Like it feels like it's always in flux.
It is. So I was fortunate to work at one of the sites that had a pilot room. So whenever we were going to do a model change, so you've got your minors and you've got your majors. So the minors, they weren't as intense as the majors, but what we would do is we would build the cars from scratch in the back room. We had a back room called the pilot room. We would involve the actual team members that were going to be building the vehicles. We had safety involved. We have ergonomics involved, and we had an action matrix type form. Whereas whenever there was an issue, we had an IRT team, issue resolution team. They would work on these issues. So as we're going and we're building the car, and we're measuring takt time, and we're looking at heights, and does this part fit, and does that connect properly, and are there any issues? When there are, we capture all those, and there's a team that's out to resolve those issues. And then when it gets very complex, they had a 7 diamond step process that they would follow to flush that out. So, you know, definitely involving the team members. Fortunate to have that pilot room in the back, and then obviously, you know, once you start getting into the faster builds, you begin to introduce, you know, we're going to build, let's just say 1 today. And then a couple days later, you could see 3. And then you would do, you know, 1 for each shift so they can all get exposure to it. And then, you know, once it's launch time, you have a launch acceleration curve in terms of, you know, if we were expecting to build 1,000 cars or 1,000 units per day, it gets reduced down potentially to 700. And then there's a ramp up period depending on how complex the changes are for you to get to that 1,000 mark. So, you know, we definitely take our time, involve all the right people, you know, have everyone on board, in-house, out-of-house, suppliers, vendors, everyone involved in the process. And then we also capture any issues, and then we document who's looking after it, what the timelines are, what the countermeasures are. And sometimes we have to put in short-term countermeasures because, you know, the parts may already be in motion from the other side of the world on a ship. So we may have to set up a rework in-house, potentially set up someone, you know, facilitating something until the long-term change can come.
That's interesting. So you basically build the pilot room in the back, helps you build the vehicle from scratch with a representative from each of the different departments, really build it, get it into, you know, that's amazing. So do a trial run of the production before you repurpose the plant and the processes and the people to do it at volume. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
That's really phenomenal.
Absolutely, yeah. And not all the sites have the capability of doing an offline build or a slow build that they would call it. They would just introduce it onto the line. And when you introduce it right away to the line, if there's, you know, major issues, you're into some serious downtime, right? So we try to identify those prior to doing the online builds.
That is phenomenal. So the way you deal with variability, now it is still variability that is from model to model. So, you know, it's not like you're customizing each car differently. So I recognize that, but it is still a process built for you to deal with variability in the models. And so how long would a model go, you know, be in production on a line? Like, is it months or years? Once it's gone through the pilot phase.
Yeah. So typically you'll do, you know, 3 minor builds in a row, 3 or 4 years in a row where you'll do minors, and then you'll look at a major typically every 5 years, just because there's such a big capital investment. You know, you're looking at new dies, potentially equipment for your body shop, you know, lots of infotainment changes to the vehicle. So just the costs alone of doing those holds back.
Right. Okay. Super
Yeah, it's an incredible industry because again, it's like so competitive, and your competitor comes out with a new model, right? So you gotta keep up, and I think too, you know, there's other high volume plants when we think about like consumer goods, like whether it's toothpaste or making kind of a beverage, but like a car is I mean nowadays what, you know, $50,000 piece of equipment with so many different parts, mechanical, electrical, hydraulic components. It's very, very complicated piece of equipment, but it's going out in the volumes when you're talking in millions. So it's just really, I don't think there's another type of manufacturing that's as complicated as automotive.
Yeah, definitely at that volume. I would imagine it's just crazy. Speaking of like, I want to take it back to tech, especially because it was in the vogue. I think it's still in the vogue. There's shortages because of the chips and the semiconductors. Tell us a little bit about what your experience with the chips were. Actually, let's just make it somewhat fun too. What are areas in a car that relies on logic and semiconductor that normal people like me who don't know anything about how cars are made would be surprised?
You've got EEC modules, electronic control module. You've got your fuel control module. You've got your main body wire harness that connects to the IP that's got tons of those chips inside of it. So, anything that where there's a sensor, where there's information that's being gathered all over the vehicle. So very, very complicated and lots of parts. And a lot of those parts we don't see because they come to us already pre-built, like an EEC module or fuel control module, or airbag modules inside the steering wheel, right? All those spots. So I know when we faced the impact of the microchip shortage, at that time, we were building one of the lower contribution margin vehicles. So they were sending all of the anytime that they can get their hands on chips to the higher ones, so the larger SUVs, the pickup trucks. So where the big money or the bread and butter for the organization was being made, it was being deferred to there. And even when they weren't being able to get the parts, they would build the vehicles, park them somewhere, and then get those chips into them at a later time. So just to keep things moving, because a lot of the auto manufacturers will sign contracts saying we're going to buy X amount of thousands of engines or this part or that part, and if they don't buy them, they're still responsible for paying for them. So keeping the lines moving and keeping everything fluid was key in the process, right? And I remember that they had a lot of quality control checks put into place, and the warranty was kept very, very low in terms of the outcomes of those campaigns.
Right.
Yeah, and that's incredible, because I think that's one of the things you mentioned earlier in the podcast, where when you go out of process, right, now quality is super important, because like if once you have to rework and do something. So I think that's an important lesson for everyone out there is if you do find yourself in a situation like you have the chip shortage, having that extra set of eyes on quality is absolutely critical. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of quality, let me make it a little more painful. Well, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
I noticed that you went through a few ISO processes and audits. Is that true? I'm sure you've gone through a bunch of ISO audits.
Absolutely. ISO 9000 and
What's the
ISO
good, the bad,
14000.
and the ugly?
It almost feels like when you go through the audit that the auditor's whole intention is just to find something or to poke holes through a system. It comes off more as an audit than it does, let's just say, a coaching session per se. But typically, doing what you say and saying what you do, whether it be ISO 9000 or ISO 14000, and document control, I believe, are the two toughest things for execution in any facility. In terms of doing what you say and saying what you do, that comes back to, do you have standardized work captured properly? Was everyone trained properly? Anytime there's updates to that, are people being retrained? Are they signing off? Is a versatility metrics being updated? So there's a lot of things that come with that. And, sometimes you get into environments where you have lots of people and everyone's like, or not everyone, you get some people saying, I have a better way. I have a better way. Well, at the end of the day, if someone has found a better way on doing a process, let's communicate that to everyone. Let's get the buy-offs. Let's get everyone involved. Make sure it's safe. Make sure it doesn't impede any quality. That it's ergonomically okay in terms of if it's putting on a part. And let's get the standard changed to that way. That way, everyone's on the same page. And if there's any issues in terms of safety or quality, when it comes to the problem-solving process, if everyone's following the same method, it makes it so much easier, right? Because you can get into environments where you have job rotation. So, every couple of hours, someone else is doing that job, someone different. And then, multiply that by 3 different shifts. So potentially you could have 12 different people doing it 12 different ways, and you're getting, various defects. And it's like, well, where do you start if no one's following the standard?
Right.
Right.
And what was the sort of, from the best that you've seen, what was the best system? You don't have to mention the name of the company or the organization, but what was some of the really well thought through and well implemented systems that you saw, whether it's systems, information systems and tech, or
Yeah.
it's just, you know, even paper-based, but the systematic approach?
The paper-based system that I really like, it's called business plan deployment. So what that is you start your year off with a scorecard with KPIs, and each one of those KPIs will have a roadmap in terms of how you're going to achieve it. So you're not just putting something up there saying, I'm hoping to get that, without a plan. A plan is put in place. So in terms of what's your objective for that KPI? What are the methods? Who's responsible for each one of those methods? You have a Gantt chart in terms of your milestone dates on what has to be accomplished and what has to be done. And then it's statused on a monthly basis. So once it's statused, then it's reviewed, and then we know at that point in time, do we need to put in countermeasure management if we're not achieving the status? Because if you look at it, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're not going to be attaining the end goal of that KPI for the month or for the year, however it's measured. So definitely business plan deployment is great, because then you mesh it to the other layers of the organization and make sure that it's all connected, so everyone's steering in one direction. So we're all working on what needs to be done. You know, let's say begins off at headquarters, it comes to, you know, level 1 at your site leadership, and then level 2, 3 at your departmental level, and then level 4, which would be like your supervisory, and then level 5, which would be your hourly teams, which also have business boards. So it's all connected all the way through. Yeah, definitely a great process. And it might have been Toyota Production System that had started business plan deployment.
All roads lead to Toyota on every one of
I was
these.
gonna say.
Yeah. So that'll and that'll come off the continuous improvement pillar.
Right.
Yeah, it's always interesting because it's, you know, has such an impact on really all industry, and now really beyond manufacturing. So yeah, Mohammed, let's talk a little bit about more of that. That's very interesting. What you're working on now. So you have all this amazing leadership, operations experience, and one of the most challenging processes out there. Tell us what you're doing now.
So I've talked to people in various industries, even in basic terms such as KPIs or scorecards, and it's non-existent. So I look at a system that's implemented in manufacturing and has done well. You know, you look at all the organizations that have been around for 100 years, give or take, your Fords, your GMs, your Chryslers, your Toyotas, your Hondas. You know, to be in that cutthroat of a business and to still be around, something must be done right. And, you know, to have the urgency and the systems in place in manufacturing, I believe they can be cascaded into other industries, whether it be financial, whether it be into insurance, whether it be into retail. I believe that those systems, if used properly, will help other industries. So instead of always going to see, you know, prices keep going up, and then them throwing it on the customer, what's that organization doing in-house to reduce costs? Like, realistically, has customer service anywhere gotten better? I haven't seen that. Right? In terms of my experience, has it gotten better? I haven't seen that. So the things that, you know, organizations are doing in-house, they're not benefiting the end customer by any means, and prices continue to go up. Whereas, you know, the warranty on vehicles nowadays, and, you know, I'll speak for Ford, GM, and Chrysler, they're building better vehicles now than they ever have. I remember they went through times where, you know, transmission problems belong to this company and air condition problems belong to that company. And, you know, a lot of that has gone away. And if you look at the pricing of the vehicles, you know, between now and 20 years ago, they haven't changed that much. They haven't, you know, it hasn't been a 3%, 4% increase in the price of the vehicle, because, you know, if you go back 20 years, that Chrysler minivan that was $20,000 would be how much now, right? And it's pretty close to that number still. So, yeah, I believe that other industries need to implement it, and it also helps with, you know, problem identification, root cause analysis. You know, changing the culture in organizations to have that continuous improvement mindset, look for issues, resolve them, make things better. You know, you know, you go into any organization and you say, hey, you know, tell me one thing that if you wish you could change, you would change it. I'm sure everybody would put up their hand and name one thing, but do they have that process? Do they have that roadmap that's going to help the organization and the leadership get there? Right? People just say, well, that's how it is and that's how it's always been, but that doesn't have to be how it is going forward, right? Status quo won't get you ahead, right?
And it's fascinating that what you describe, and it makes sense, is done by the auto manufacturers in a heavily unionized environment, which traditionally, you know, the resistance to change, or sometimes the you know, maybe incorrectly identified as a source of not being able to improve the situation. But obviously, based on what you're saying, with unions, with OEMs, with external and internal people, the industry as a whole has had to keep applying continuous improvement methodologies and keep it in mind, so that, you know, you maintain the lower price, better service, better products. Really fascinating, because, you know, that is as an excuse is thrown around, that, and I'm sure there's, you know, obviously there are all sides to a story, but union, you know, auto manufacturers, especially around here, are heavily unionized. So despite that, you are able to do change. You're going to get them involved and apply continuous improvement principles.
Absolutely. And then, and you know, you look at other industries, there isn't unions in those industries. So, you know, what would be the you know, pushback? I don't see any. I think it's, or I believe that, you know, a lot of people are unaware of what's out there and what they can utilize to improve their day-to-day business practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the rigor and the tool set that like Six Sigma brings to the table. You know, and like we are seeing a lot of adoption by other industries. Sometimes they'll come up with a different name for it, but when you look at it, you're like, wait a minute. I know this tool.
Absolutely.
Oh, we see it. I see it in software. I mean, even today on LinkedIn, I shared something about, you know, how every time we, you know, have one of these podcasts, something comes up. First of all, Toyota production system comes up. All roads lead to Toyota. They've done such a fantastic job. And then secondly, yeah, there's tons of concepts that we in software have borrowed from manufacturing. You know, we have, like, funny enough, today with one of my clients, I had to refer to the system as the code name we have for their system, because I had my team and the client on one call, and I started calling it, you know, putting the code in, or putting it into production, and I just caught myself. I said, no, wait a second, we're not going to put anything in your production, because they're a manufacturer, but rather the production system of our you know, software system. So tons and tons of terminology and methodology, like lean, you know, agile, Kanban, tons of that comes from the manufacturing space into software. So I'm always sort of keep my ears open for that kind of stuff. Well, I mean, we gotta thank the Toyota guys and the and continuous improvement and manufacturers for all this. So.
And you know, the other thing too is just seeing how much benefit when you take an industry that's not using those methods. I mean, that can be a game changer. You know, like all of a sudden you're doing KPIs and you're measuring. You know, like the example you're saying, every department had to have a continuous improvement project. Can you imagine that, taking it to another industry? Like, it'd be a game changing.
Absolutely. It would be, you know, and even as an end customer, anywhere that you go, let's say you go to a coffee shop, or you go here, you go there, and you're noticing that it's taking too long to get a coffee, or it's taking too long for this, or it's taking too long for that, or wherever, there's an opportunity, and the organization that you're going to hasn't seen that. And then, you know, not being able to see it or identify it or fix it is another issue. Right. So there's tons of opportunity. I'm sure every time you guys go out, you know, just the way that, you know, we're programmed, you're able to see deficiencies all over the place, right?
100%. I'm going to switch gears for a second. you obviously have had such a tremendous experience in the field. You're now, with the wisdom that you've accumulated through manufacturing, are looking at applying it to other industries and other settings outside of manufacturing or inside, but different departments.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about what are some of the like some advice you might have, or resources, books, anything you would recommend to somebody who is just beginning their journey. They're coming out of university or high school or wherever, and they're just starting to explore, or they're a couple of years into manufacturing or what have you. What are some of the things you can share with people like that?
I would definitely, whoever your organization is with, definitely get intimate with the production system. So learn it, learn the facets of it. The ones that directly impact you, make sure you do them as best as you can. The ones that haven't impacted you as of yet, get to know them, go into other departments and look at them in action. Because a lot of times, you could be dealing with X amount of processes or statements under your production system, and then a change in a job will bring you over here, but they're all meshed together. So seeing them in motion and learning and asking questions is definitely key. Understand why. A lot of times where in my past, something would be of change, and people would say, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? People want to know, why is it that is done that way? And what I learned going through the journey myself, right? We're not doing it just to check a box. We're doing it for a reason, and there's a good reason in behind. And it might be it's the safest way. It might be it saves money. It might be it's ergonomically the best way. There's going to be an answer in terms of why does it need to be done like that, right? So finding out reasons why is good, and then being able to explain it to others. If this person's going to be a leader and have whether it's hourly folks or skilled trades that are working with them on their team, them having a really good grasp and explaining it is very, very important.
Thank
That
you, Mohammed.
why is
Yeah.
wisdom. That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Like critical thinking, knowing why you're doing something is, and I mean, as obvious as it sounds, I, on a regular basis forget at my age and my experience. So it totally
Yeah.
makes sense. Sorry,
And
Tom, go ahead. You were going to say something.
no, thank you, Mohammed, for sharing that, because that's
You're
really, really
welcome.
advice, especially for people starting out in their career, to take that interest and focus on your area, but also take interest in the areas around you. And I think that transcends all industries, whether you're
Yeah.
working in a bank or in a store. Yeah, be curious, learn. It will take you a long way in your career. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge
Absolutely.
with the audience. So we
Yeah.
we are
Think.
hitting the 40-minute mark. So I did want to ask, though, to our audience, what can we do to help you, and what would you like our audience to know about what you're doing now, and promote what you're doing?
So anyone that's interested in it, definitely reach out to me. I'm sure I can leave my contact information with you, Tom. And if anyone has any good leads in terms of if organizations are looking for new process systems, implementation, improvement, if they're looking to save money going forward, definitely those are all spaces and sectors for opportunity that are out there. So just sharing that information and then feeding it back.
Absolutely. We will make sure to
Fantastic.
share your contact information in the description of the video below, and also your LinkedIn information. I think everybody, as we go into 2024, is going to look at opportunities to save money. So
Yeah.
definitely, please reach out to Mohammed. You're going to need it. Definitely, please consult the experts. So with that, I just want to say again, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. Thank you. Thank you both.
Really appreciate it, and nice to meet you.
Appreciate it. Likewise.